Welcome to the History Vault. Some doors were never meant to be opened. On the 5th of April, 1923, Lord Carnarvon died in a Cairo hotel room, killed by an infected mosquito bite he had nicked open with his razor. The newspapers had a simpler explanation. He had opened a pharaoh's tomb, and the pharaoh had answered, "I am Quill, and this is the vault, where we open the doors that others nail shut." Tonight, 5 ancient curses that, by every eerie record, appear to have come true, and 5 reasons. The truth is stranger than any spell. Every great treasure seems to arrive with a warning attached. A line of script above a doorway. A rumor whispered by the men who dug. For thousands of years, we have carved threats into stone to keep the living out. And every so often, the warning seems to keep its promise. These are the 5 that history could not quite explain away. We begin our countdown at number 5, with a stone that has been called the most unlucky object on Earth, the Koh-i-Noor Diamond. Its name means mountain of light. Its legend carries a far darker line. An old Hindu text warns that whoever owns this diamond will own the world, and all its misfortunes. Only a woman, or a god, can wear it unharmed. For 800 years, the men who held it seemed to prove that warning right. The diamond passed through the hands of sultans and shahs, and almost every one of them met a violent end. One ruler was blinded. Another, so the legend goes, was tortured with jewels and gold. Dynasties rose around the stone, and then collapsed in war and betrayal. In 1849, the diamond was surrendered to the British Crown after the fall of the Sikh Empire. It was signed away by a 10-year-old boy, Duleep Singh, the last Sikh maharaja. And Queen Victoria, who received it, was said to fear the old warning. But look closely at that list of ruined kings, and a much simpler pattern appears. The Koh-i-Noor spent centuries in the most violent courts in Asia, passed between conquerors by the sword. A gem does not need a curse to bring ruin to men who are already murdering each other to possess it. The stone did not create the bloodshed. It simply followed it. Every empire that held it was already at war, already collapsing from within. Today the diamond sits in the Tower of London, set into a crown. It has been worn only by queens ever since, and they have lived long, quiet lives. The clause that spares women was never magic. It was a convenient way to explain a run of very human violence. Number 5 is less a curse than a mirror, held up to the men who wanted the world. Number 4 takes us from a palace to a glacier, and to a body that waited 5,000 years to be found. In September of 1991, 2 German hikers, Erika and Helmut Simon, spotted a corpse frozen in the ice of the Otzi Alps. They assumed he was a lost climber. He was a Copper Age man, the oldest natural mummy in Europe. The world named him Otzi. And then, one by one, the people who had touched his story began to die. The forensic examiner who first handled the body, Rainer Henn, died in a car crash while driving to a conference about the Iceman. The mountain guide who led the recovery, Kurt Fritz, was killed by an avalanche. A filmmaker who had documented the discovery died soon after of a brain tumor. Helmut Simon himself, the man who found him, vanished on a hike in 2004 and was recovered dead in a blizzard. The head of the rescue team that found Simon's body suffered a fatal heart attack within hours of the funeral. By the count of the newspapers, at least 7 people linked to Otzi were now dead. 7 deaths sounds like a pattern, but consider how many others that number quietly leaves out. Hundreds of scientists, guides and workers have handled Otzi across 3 decades, and nearly all of them are alive and well. The men who died were often older, some already ill, and their deaths were spread across many years and entirely ordinary causes. Choose any large group of people, and some of them will die. That is not a curse. It is arithmetic. The mummy itself tells a far more interesting story than any hex. Otzi was around 45 when he died, and he did not die peacefully. An arrowhead was found buried in his shoulder. He was murdered on that mountain. The real mystery is not who the Iceman kills. It is who killed the Iceman, and why. Number 4 is a 5,000-year-old cold case, wearing a ghost story as a disguise. At number 3, we return to a jewel, perhaps the most famous cursed object in the world, the Hope Diamond. 45 carats of deep blue stone, now resting behind glass at the Smithsonian in Washington. Its legend begins with a theft. The diamond, it is said, was pried from the eye of a Hindu idol, and the idol's guardians laid a curse on anyone who kept it. What followed reads like a catalogue of ruin. The stone was tied to the French crown, and the monarchy fell to the guillotine. Legend even links it to Marie Antoinette, beheaded in the Revolution. Later owners were said to face bankruptcy, madness, and sudden death. In America, the socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean bought it, and her life filled with tragedy. Her young son died in a car accident. Her family fortune collapsed. The curse of the Blue Diamond seemed undeniable. Except that almost none of it survives contact with daylight. The tale of the stolen idol's eye cannot be traced to any real temple. There is no ancient original curse. The story was assembled, and then carefully polished, by the men who had a diamond to sell. The jeweler Pierre Cartier reportedly spun the darkest version of the legend to make the stone irresistible to a wealthy buyer. A cursed diamond, after all, is far more thrilling than an ordinary one. When the Hope Diamond was mailed to the Smithsonian in 1958, the newspapers joked that the postman was doomed. He delivered the package, went home, and lived an entirely ordinary life. Marie Antoinette, for the record, never owned this particular stone. Number 3 is not a cursed jewel. It is a masterclass in marketing. Number 2 is, to my eye, the most unsettling coincidence on this entire list. In the city of Samarkand lies the Tomb of Timur, the 14th century conqueror, the West called Tamerlane, a warlord who left pyramids of skulls behind him. Carved near his grave, the story says, was a warning: whoever opens my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I. In June of 1941, Soviet scientists decided to open it anyway. On the 19th of June, 1941, the anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov lifted the lid of Timur's tomb to study the warlord's bones. Inside, so the story goes, a second inscription warned that disturbing the grave would summon the demons of war. 3 days later, on the 22nd of June, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. Nearly 4 million troops poured across the Soviet border in the largest invasion in human history. An invader more terrible than Timur, arriving almost to the very day. The timing has haunted the story ever since. It is a genuinely eerie fit, and it is, almost certainly, a coincidence. Operation Barbarossa was planned for many months. Hitler signed the directive in December of 1940, long before anyone touched the tomb. Wars of that scale are not scheduled around a Soviet archaeology dig. But the legend has a second act, and this is where it becomes almost irresistible. In late 1942, Timur's remains were reburied with full Islamic rites. And soon after, the Soviets won the brutal turning point of the war at Stalingrad. Believers point to the reburial. Historians point to the Red Army. The tide turned because of winter, supply lines, and staggering sacrifice, not a warlord's bones. Number 2 proves that the most powerful curses are simply excellent timing. And at number 1, the curse that started them all, the Curse of the Pharaohs and the Tomb of Tutankhamun. In November of 1922, the archaeologist Howard Carter broke through into a sealed chamber, untouched for 3,000 years. Behind it lay the Golden Boy King, and the greatest treasure ever found. Within months, the man who had paid for it all would be dead. Lord Carnarvon, Carter's wealthy patron, was there at the moment of discovery. Weeks later he tore open a mosquito bite while shaving. The wound turned septic, and he died in Cairo on the 5th of April, 1923. It was said that at the instant of his death, every light in Cairo went dark. And that back in England, his dog howled once and dropped dead. The newspapers erupted. A pharaoh's curse had struck down the man who disturbed the tomb. Over the years, more deaths were added to the tally, and the legend only grew. But step back from the headlines, and the curse thins to almost nothing. The lights of Cairo failed constantly, power cuts were routine, and no record marks that night as anything special. As for Carnarvon, he had been in fragile health for 20 years, ever since a near-fatal car accident. The most telling figure comes from the tomb itself. Of the 58 people present when the burial chamber was opened, only 8 died within a dozen years. Howard Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb, lived another 17 years and died quietly in his bed. A later study in the British Medical Journal found no cursed shortening of life at all among those who were exposed. And there was no inscription threatening death on the pharaoh's door. That famous line was invented by the press. Number 1 is the most famous curse in history, and very likely the emptiest. 5 curses then, and 5 endings that arrive without a shred of magic. A run of very human violence, a cluster of ordinary deaths, a clever sales pitch, an accident of timing, and a story the newspapers were only too glad to print. Yet notice how each legend survives anyway. We want the warning carved above the door to mean something. We want the treasure to be dangerous, because danger makes it worthy. The truth is that we are the ones who curse these objects by needing them so badly to matter. If you would like to keep opening the doors that others nail shut, subscribe, and stay a while in the vault. Quill will leave the candle burning. Some mysteries we may never solve. Subscribe to the History Vault, and we will open the next door together.